A 4-day work week. It's the thing of dreams. And according to many studies that I've read about in many books, it's actually highly linked to better productivity and all sorts of other very business-savvy things that only a fool would say no to. But all of those books I've read, the examples have been from companies, businesses, even restaurants that had teams. So it was really easy to tell myself excuse after excuse of why it clearly could work for a team, but not work so well for us solopreneurs or itty-bitty businesses trying to do the work of 10 people while only being actually 1 or maybe 2 people. That is, until I saw a post by Julie Cloutier on Instagram where she was celebrating her 1-year anniversary of a 4-day work week. Well, shit. There goes all my excuses, don't they? On this week's episode of the Maker's Playbook podcast, I dig into the story behind what pushed Julie to finally adopt this adjusted work schedule, what the reality really looks like, how it's affected her business model and, frankly, revenue, and a lot more, right after this quick word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brent, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brent. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 13 years, Rebecca Ikes-Kara. Hey, Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay! Well, since I just said it, for people who don't know you, I can see you right now, but they can't. How would you introduce yourself?
Well, I usually just introduce myself by saying my name's Julie, and if it's in a place where they're asking what I do, I usually just say I'm an artist. I usually let it be pretty vague. And then usually I'll say that I work with clay most days because I also paint and I do other things. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, I don't like to be labeled as a potter, I guess. I like more generalized.
Yep.
So yeah, my name's Julie and I live in Sonoma County and I lived in San Francisco for a long time and we moved to the country about 5 years ago. And I work out of my home.
That's recently.
It is recent, yeah. It feels recent.
Just to give everybody context, if you don't mind sharing, who's we for what life looks like for you, moving and all these things?
Just me and my husband. It's just the two of us.
Well, and also Sonoma County is a little bit more manageable than San Francisco, but either are like a high cost of living to be a working artist, to like be doing this thing. I mean, I think it's hard enough in the Midwest, and that's nothing compared to New York or pretty much anywhere in California. I feel like the whole state.
It's very expensive to live anywhere out here. Yeah, we're making it work. We don't have kids, so that's one reason I think we can maybe make it work more than others. And we are generally like quite frugal. So those are the two things that we have going for us.
Is your husband also an artist?
He's not. He's a chef.
Oh, cool. That's art.
I mean, it is, but he doesn't even like chef. He prefers cook. So
fair enough. Highly qualified cook.
He's more out of the restaurant world and is more of a cooking instructor right now. So
Okay, so I feel like Francesca's going to want to sit down and have a whole sets of conversations about food. And I feel like there's frequently such a commonality between the food world and the pottery world, which, you know, pragmatically makes sense. But even just people's passions coexisting, like it seems to be quite the, frequent pair, if you will.
Yeah, we haven't necessarily collaborated on everything, but I think just how we cook and eat together and how we use the stuff in our house, it all makes sense.
Totally. Well, and also I'm putting my own story on this, but it's really nice that you're self-employed in my mind, because the work hours of working in food can be really rough. And I imagine if you were 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, you basically would hardly ever see each other.
Totally. I mean, especially the first 10 years of us being together, I can be more flexible. So I usually would change my work kind of around his schedule. Sometimes I would work longer days, or just, I feel I'm quite adaptable with my schedule, and I'm trying to be a little bit more, I think the last year or two, I'm more consistent with my work days. But before I'd be like, yeah, sure, I can just change the day here and, try to be overly flexible for others.
That's like the perfect segue, because that's exactly what we got to started talking about was I don't know if a journey is too big of a word, I'll let you put the words to it of what you've been consciously working on. But I wanted to give everybody that kind of pretext of where you are in the world and what kind of home life is like, because it's easy to write off doing less if it's like, oh, well, I mean, do you really even have to work? Or do you, like all the excuses we give ourselves.
Right. I mean, many people that we just meet for the first time will assume, after I tell them I'm an artist and I work with clay and I work in my garage, and they're just like, they think I'm doing it for fun and it's not like a real living. And they'll assume I married, a guy in tech. Often they're like, oh, what tech company is? And he's like, no, I make a living from this. And for the last couple of years, we've been kind of living off of mine, mostly. When he was kind of laid off in the restaurant industry with COVID, his industry was hit much harder than mine was. And I mean, we've all been dealing with things about that. But yeah, You
could still go to the garage, though, and he couldn't go. Yeah. Yep.
I think that's one thing I'm proud of, is that this is a real business. I'm very open about talking about money with friends, even strangers, people I don't know that much. So, last year I made $68,000 net, that, to me, that's really good. That's enough for us, plus a little bit more to make it work.
Which, just to put that into context for people who maybe aren't in the US, in a place like California is not going to get you that far, right? You do have to be very strategic with that.
Yes.
Because I know, for friends of mine in Italy, they're going to hear that number and be like, holy crap, I'm moving to the US. And I'm going to be like, hold the phone. Rent, I mean, I imagine in San Francisco proper, it would barely break even. I mean, that's month to month, essentially.
Yeah, it's not a lot. There's not, that much extra sometimes. But yeah, we make it work. And, after expenses, I strive to make $100,000 gross, in sales. There's a lot that gets knocked off of that. So
I have a spreadsheet for this, as will come as no surprise to anyone who's listened to me talk, because it's kind of crazy to realize, going for, our goal net is to earn $63,000 a year, which goes farther in Milwaukee than Sonoma County. But it's crazy to realize, oh, if that's what I want to earn, before taxes, that's kind of closer to 80, if not 90, depending on your percentages. I just always assume 30%. But then that's the salary. So then your operations have to be more than that. I think I appreciate talking about numbers, because really then when you start to do it, it gets to be a much bigger number than people expect, even when you are living really simply. And it's well, here's how much I never see. Here's the money that's literally I'm never going to touch it, because it's never was mine to begin with, as far as taxes or cost of operations, cost of doing business. So
yeah, it's a lot of cups. It's a lot of bowls when you break it down. And then I teach on the side. So that also is probably 15-20% of my income, which is nice to do other things, not on the wheel, diversify a little bit.
Or get out of the house.
Yeah, and get out of the house.
Unless they're coming to you, then I guess that doesn't help. Aside from the numbers, also, so since you mentioned cups and bowls, for anybody who doesn't know your work, mostly functional wear, how is it kind of all setting the scene for talking about also doing less is different for production work than huge sculptures, right?
Yeah, so mostly cups and bowls. I get so many requests for plates. And I always say, don't do, doing plates is a whole other thing with storage and firing, and I'm not there yet. I'll make plates just for me. But yeah, mostly cups and bowls, and I do sculptures, but that's not something I share as much. I could be a little bit more confident in that way. So it's a little bit just for me. And I do try to sell some smaller sculptures, like things that are much more inviting, or I call them like domestic sculptures, small home objects.
I like that term. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so it's like a little more approachable than like something in a gallery or something like that.
Right. I'm envisioning something that might be on the side table next to the book you're reading that you get to enjoy every day, rather than like up on high on a bookshelf, don't touch it, be careful, stay away type thing.
Yeah, some of the sculptures I'll make for the home are meant to be used, moved around, rearranged, different components to things. So they're more like playful pieces.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that. I'm going to have to go dig through the Instagram now to see more of them.
Yeah, you'll find some occasionally here and there sprinkled. But I do wish sometimes it would be something I would share more. Sometimes I think people don't want to see that, or, I just get in my head a little bit.
Oh, gosh, don't we all? I mean, come on, especially with the pressure of the internet. Meanwhile, everybody's just experimenting at the end of the day. None of us know what we're doing.
And the sculptures really inform my functional stuff. So it's a big part of the studio, even if I don't spend as much time. It really influences and pushes my new things.
Yeah, totally. When you're, focusing on functional, and is that mostly online? Is that mostly in person? Because I imagine, you're in a good place where that could work either way.
Yeah, I try to sell mostly direct. When I first started, I was doing more wholesale, and it's just so hard to do wholesale with I don't want to make more pieces to compensate for that. So I think I made maybe a year or two before 2020, I decided that I need to just say no to a lot of people, because it is, a lot of people would reach out and want to carry it, and I try to make it work. So I made a pretty conscious decision to just work with a couple shops that were there with me from the beginning. And after the pandemic hit, it was a really smart move, because I wasn't relying on wholesale, and nobody ordered anything from me from a store, a retail location, for a year. So that's good that I had transitioned that before. I didn't have to fully pivot, because I was already selling quite a bit just direct from my website. And I do some studio sales here. I've kind of slowed down on some craft fairs. I just rather invite people here, see where it gets made. And I do that a few times a year.
Years ago, when I saw studio sales, when I saw studio tours, this is a total aside and has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But as a marketer, I am fascinated, because there's so many pottery tours around the country in different areas. And there's one here in Milwaukee. There's one in Northern Illinois. And my brain is who's going to drive to all these different, it takes a lot of effort on the part of the people attending, that I'm these can't possibly, sure, the big ones, Montana, whatever, sure. But no, people turn out, it's so comforting for me to where it's you don't always have to go to people.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when I do a studio sale and people still show up. Sometimes I think it's going to stop or slow down, but especially, living where we live, people love to come up here for the day and do other things as well. But yeah, people go, and I love it. I feel very rejuvenated after I meet a lot of people. It's an intense day, but it's great.
Right. It's the good kind of tired in a way. Yeah. And at least it is just the one day there where if you don't want to clean up at the end of the day, you can go to bed and deal with it later, as opposed to going to a market and tearing down at the end. And
yeah, craft fairs are really a lot of work to do. And I've done a few of the big ones in San Francisco, and, it's a 3-4 day thing. I stay at a friend's place. I had to rent a truck. It's a lot. And they're getting much more expensive to do. Just the booth costs. It's not what it used to be. So
I think there's so many more for-profit event production companies behind a lot of them. At least I've noticed in the Chicagoland area of this suburbs fair is put on by the same company as that suburbs, by the same company as that. Where I'm okay, I see what's going on here. It's a little bit different than the multiple decades old art fair that's been around forever, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I digress. I selfishly want to dig into the impetus, how it's working, all the things of what you kind of put out into the world, and I just grabbed hold of because I'm trying to learn how to do this, which is doing less effectively. I don't know how you want to phrase it.
Yeah, doing less, I get more done for sure. I mostly work 4 days a week now. I've been even these past couple of weeks, I feel like I've got more to do, and I really fight the urge to like add on this extra day sometimes. But I'd say 90% of the time I'm working 4 days a week. I really didn't think, it still feels crazy to say, but I really didn't think I could make it work for a long time.
I literally just finished the audiobook about the 4-day work week and how like all these case studies, right? I have all of this logical information in my brain about why it's more productive, why it's better for creativity, all these reasons. But the actual application of it, because all the case studies in the book are like companies. And I'm like, yeah, you have a team of people to manage everything that needs to get done. There aren't a lot of stories of like solo person managing all of this, because I'm also guessing, does 4 days a week mean 4 long days to make up for it, or you're sticking with the same time?
4 regular days. Occasionally, there's other things that happen, but I'm not working 10-hour days. Definitely not. This is my 8th year of doing this full time. So I feel like it took me a while to be confident enough that I could, you get faster over the years. You start to be a little more decisive, and yeah, I don't know. I just really needed it mentally, personally a couple years ago, and I needed to switch because I did feel like I was working all the time, working from home like 7 days a week. The husband was out of work, so I really felt like I needed to be down there all the time. But I wasn't very productive. It was really getting to me. So
that's a really great point. So effectively, you were kind of quote unquote pulling back at the same time that you were completely reliant on your income and your business, which sounds counterintuitive probably to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So how did you, like, pragmatically, do you feel like you're still producing the same amount, but because over the years you've gotten faster, it's possible, or has more than that shifted?
I'm either making the same amount of work, or I'm making pieces that have like a better return on my time, I guess. So I'm just a little smarter. I feel like every year I try to become, 5% smarter in the studio. And initially I wanted to take a whole month off. This is how it kind of started, like thinking about less time and getting, kind of maybe taking a mini sabbatical or something. I was going to turn 40 and I was like, okay, for a long time, I really wanted to take a whole month off or a whole summer off. I really felt I never could do it. And then I started to, look at money and look at days of the year and break things down. And what do I have to do to take a whole month off? And then I realized a month off, is 30 days. And if I take a whole day off less a week, it's actually more time off, but maybe it feels a little bit less jarring than taking a whole summer month off. So that's how I went for the 4-day a week as a trial. And it was just a trial at first. It wasn't like, this is how it's going to be forever. Let's just do this for 2 or 3 months and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And so, because my brain immediately is thinking, if I do a trial, either it gets pushed back and it gets pushed back, or all of my terrible habits are going to come out in this interview. I've spent 2 years trying to help people do things. And in this conversation, it's going to be very clear that I'm not practicing what I preach. So in that trial, are you just kind of forcing yourself to accept, okay, I didn't get done what I thought I was going to get done. I'm going to sit with that and deal with it. Or you're sneaking in time to catch up, or I'm thinking of all the ways around it right now.
I mean, it kind of just was working out. I was just I would do in my 4 days, 3 days is with clay. And the other day is either photo shoots or marketing or web or glazing. But, I'll do 2 throwing days and then 1 trim day. And then the other day is this other work day. So that's how I schedule. And so in those 2 throwing days, I just try to get a certain quantity of retail price pieces finished in those days. And most weeks I hit those numbers.
That's awesome.
So I have realistic goals. I don't overshoot as well.
That's probably part of my problem.
I don't overshoot. I've had to, and still sometimes I love making lists, and a lot of these things get pushed down to the other next week.
Yep. I am such a list person. I will say I need to get back into the habit. I used to, at the end of the day, I would make the to-do list for the next day, and then I would put the estimated amount of time I thought each thing would take me, because then it gave me a very realistic, I would look at the calendar and see, okay, well, today, for example, I have 2 podcast interviews and another phone call that's going to be an hour. So if I only wanted to work 8 hours, that means I have 5 hours left in the day. And if I look at the list and realize, oh, well, I just made a to-do list that's 7 hours long or 10 hours long, it gave me this very like tactile, realistic thing. That was great when I was doing that.
Yeah, I kind of stopped thinking time to work because in terms of like the task, because sometimes you just don't, like some things are just going to take, they're always going to take longer. So then you just end up being disappointed.
It helped me get more realistic with myself because I would then write down, when I was really staunch about it, when I first started doing it, I would start a timer, like an alarm, for that amount of time. So then when the alarm went off, I could be like, oh, okay, well, I need another half hour. I need something. And so then I would kind of track, like, actually, this took me, because so much of what we do is also repeatable. You're doing it again a month later or 2 weeks later or whatever. Then I would kind of try to note it. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but just be like, oh, okay. So then I would, after I did it for a month or so, I was starting to budget more time for things and be less disappointed in myself.
Yeah, it sounds like you did have your realistic goals for that.
Eventually. They go away really quickly, but at least it's just kind of a way to check in, to be like, oh, okay, the reason I'm feeling overwhelmed today or like I didn't get anything done is just because I set an unrealistic list as opposed to didn't work hard enough, right?
Right.
But I like that you point out there's an entire day separate from, because there are so many other business things you have to do.
Yeah, I do everything. I don't have an employee. I've never had anyone come help me with anything. So sometimes that week is, if there are a lot of orders, that's a shipping day or, all the other things. Sometimes it's teaching, painting, coming up with new classes.
Curriculum development takes a lot of time.
It really does. Yeah.
That definitely has been my learning curve in the last year.
And then, with painting, I have to like paint something that represents the class and the promotional material involved and marketing and making newsletters and writing.
All the communication bits, following up on emails, yeah. Okay, we're going to move away from the admin side of it because we both look like we need to have a cocktail. I think that I know what you mean, but I just want to dig into it a little bit because I can imagine people listening and being like, okay, how does that work when you talk about making pieces that have a greater return? Because where my brain goes is like, okay, not making arduous lidded vessels, or like, is there a world where you cannot make mugs or things with handles in general? Or that's where my brain goes in terms of the production cost of your time to produce a piece. But is that the right or wrong assumption?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I make these, so I'm only starting to get into handles. For a long time, I didn't even make handles. So of course, like the things without handles are going to be, things I can make in my sleep really fast. The more simple shaped pieces, which I still like making too. I'm not trying to like make pieces that I don't like just because I'm fast at them. But there was a period I had to stop making these bowls that I call double bowls that are I make 2 bowls and then I attach them. I could probably throw many bowls and the time it takes to merge these 2 things. It's very, very time consuming and delicate. And they're very popular. And so at some point I took like a year off from making them, even though everybody wanted to buy them because I was losing money on them. Like I really couldn't. And I was doing wholesale with them too. It was ridiculous. But it was, at the beginning, it was good to that's how people would know about my work. And sometimes it's okay to make things that take time and are more special pieces. But it's a problem when you're not pricing them high enough as well. So I took a break from them and I just, instead of raising them like astronomically, I just stopped making them. And so, so those are just some pieces like that I just had to not make as often.
Well, and what I heard you say at the beginning there is you're not completely giving up your style. You're still making things. Because I think some people will hear this, because the thing I hear from other people over and over again is like, make what you love, make what you love. And I struggle pragmatically to be like, yes, but also when this is your only income, you also have to make what you can sell. And, I hate handles, so therefore I should not make mugs. But how realistic is that when even potters are the ones who buy all the mugs? Like, we all complain about making mugs, and then what do we buy from each other?
Yes.
Flippin' mugs.
Well, if anyone knows my work, I've got mugs coming out soon. So it's the first time in like 8 years. They will be priced a little bit more than my regular cups.
As they should. They take more work.
Yeah, and I think like the more simple pieces, for example, like those, I don't really do like big drops. I like to always have something available in the web shop. And so those pieces that don't take me as long, I want those always in stock. So
Got it.
I try not to have the pieces that are fast to make be out. Like those just need to be in there. And they're also, the best sellers. There's no reason for me to not have those in there. So
That's really interesting because how you've got my brain going now in terms of like how always having something available and always having something that you might need to package and ship. How does that kind of play into the 4-day work week for you with time management? Because I guess my assumption was you were doing shop updates because then you can really control that schedule.
yeah, so I'll do like, a monthly newsletter or something like that. And then they'll have more orders go out at the same time. But, there'll still be some weeks where I'll take a break from throwing and I'll wrap up like 4 boxes. Like, I don't think of that as something slowing me down. I kind of think of it more as it's good for my body to take a break and to stand up. So I don't mind wrapping, packing boxes on a non-ship day, it's okay for me. I know some people really hate that, but.
Well, I've seen some people who like when they have a shop always available, say all items go out on Tuesdays or all, like where they've kind of set so that they can do one pickup from a postal service or, there's a lot of different reasons to do it to kind of like
I'll
manage
do it once
time.
or twice a week, depending on, the time. But yeah, usually it'll either be a Monday or Tuesday and then on a Friday or Saturday.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good point just as far as, I'm such a like batch process person, but when it's such a physical thing, you do need to like get up and move.
Yeah, I'll think of it as like little mini batches because I prefer to pack 4 boxes, or 8 boxes instead of like 30. I don't want to do a big batch like that.
Every person you do hear doing big updates that then have an entire day or 2 days of shipping are like, oh my God, why do I do this? This is the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. I've, over the years, I try to really listen to the things I like to do or how I like to do them. And just, even if it slows me down or seems unproductive, to just do some packaging here and there, I'm okay.
Do you think that kind of putting everything into 4 days, are you more focused then when you are working? Like, do you feel like when you were working however many days a week, you just kind of like, oh, someone sent me a message, I'm going to pick up my phone. Oh, this, oh, that. Like, is it a more kind of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, like drilled down? Like, I'm in the studio. That's it. I'm focused on this.
I'm pretty focused during those 4 days. I'm sure I still get, have disruptions and interruptions throughout the day. But I still think of like I'll do every hour I'll do like a little 5-minute garden update or like just look at the plants, like just for my body, not even just, I kind of need some distractions. Otherwise I'll just be hunched over for hours. But I'm quite focused on those 4 days.
Because I think it was Joe from Old Forge that he and I were chatting, or he was sharing somewhere that, he's in the studio such a minimal amount of time. Like when he's there, it's like, I'm getting XYZ done and that's it. And I'm not doing anything else in order to keep that time minimal to, be with his child or just to keep that work time manageable instead of letting it kind of pull you away into a 10-hour day because you're like scattered all over the place.
Yeah, I definitely need, I don't schedule things on throwing days. I do try to not do too much during those more wheel heavy days. And I don't usually throw more than 5 or 6 hours in a day too. Before I did, but I'm getting older, so.
You can't be that old.
My body feels it more. I'm going to be 41. I'll be 41.
Okay, I was like, I don't think we're that different, but I think my body feels worse than my 90-year-old grandmother. Like, she's doing better than I am. So.
I just started physical therapy for my hips.
Yeah.
So my hips are the issue right now.
This is the moment in which I try to bring you into my world, and we're only 5 years difference, really more like 4 and a bit, if I'm being honest, because I have a November birthday. But standing, man, it's where it's at. Standing throwing.
I've been thinking about it, especially trimming. To me, trimming is where my body hurts the most. I think I need to elevate.
So that's interesting because I don't currently, because we only have one wheel in the house and Francesco's like the main person, but I used to stand to throw and sit to trim because the studio I was at, I didn't have a standing wheel that like I had adjusted to myself. I had to like lift up a wheel every single time. And if it was a vase, for example, I'm only 5'4", so I couldn't like see properly, like over the top the way you need to with trimming. Whereas with throwing, I'm just looking from the side, so it didn't matter. But for trimming, I couldn't. It was too short. So
yeah, it's been on my mind for a while. And I'm kind of, when I want to maybe do something, like I'll dwell on it and think about it for like a year. You know, like I'd been thinking about working less for a long time. Like it takes me a long time to actually do it. But then once I do it, it's like revolutionary. So that's probably my next big step.
I feel like well, we can talk all about it because I also feel like I'm going to stereotype all of us in the US. I think ergonomics are now starting to be discussed, whereas like when I did the course that I did in Italy where I met Francesco, like the very first thing the instructors came around and watched us throw to be like, okay, straighten your back, do this, do that.
So smart.
And I had requested to stand. And so they came over and went, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So they didn't know about standing.
I mean, I think it was known. It just isn't that, it's not that common.
Yeah.
But I will say, pro tip really quickly, this doesn't have to be an episode about standing to throw. But what I did not have in my community studio is, if you can, in a perfect world, have a wall behind you, because you actually want the support behind you when you're, you don't want to just be freestanding, because then you can just as easily kind of adjust your body. There's a whole article I can send you with like where you want the pressure point, like the support points.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Francesco dreams of the day he can have a Mediterranean wheel again, which is like half sitting, half standing, and you throw to the side. So it's supposed to be like the answer to all the problems. But I digress completely. I understand that it's probably just as simple as choosing to do it and doing it, but I feel like there has to be something else to implement that got you into a 4-day work week, because my brain just does not compute with being a solo business owner and the amount of work that's needed.
You start to make decisions to make it work. It forces you to have to be better about saying yes and saying no to the right things. And I mean, I used to work a lot. Like before I even started this full time, I was working somewhere else for like, I had a day job, 35 to 40 hours a week. And then I would spend 30 to 40 hours in the studio. Like it was, I was selling work, but it wasn't like my job. And, I was working 70, 80 hours a week for a couple of years. And so when I did go full time, I still felt like I needed to be working all the time. And, after so many years, it just wasn't working anymore.
How long ago did you go full time?
I went full time in 2015.
And then do you feel like, I'm just coming up with all the excuses we all give to not be able to do this, right?
I just kept coming up with excuses as well for like over a year. Just like, no, we won't be able to make it work. You just come up with,
Because I guess I'm thinking like, oh, well, you can do that once you had a big enough audience, right? Like once you had your kind of your newsletter list or your set thing or your, once you get to this point, then you can pull back. And
there's never a good time. There really isn't.
Right.
I mean, it is, I think maybe starting out 4 days a week might be really hard, especially if you are doing, designing your website and doing all this other stuff and photography. And yeah, there's so many reasons not to do it. And I think at some point, what made me fully go for it is just try it. You can go back. It's fine. Like just try it. It was like the same thing when we moved to the country. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. And I was like, well, we can always move back to the city. So yeah, just give it. I just tried it. I just gave myself 3 months to see how I like, and I might not even like working. I might want to work more than 4 days just because.
I think it's so smart to have looked at trying to take a whole month off, because we just took 3 weeks off. I say off. I also taught 2 workshops in the middle, and
not
we were
off, but more off.
No, we were in a different country, right? Time zone off.
Yes.
It was still a very creative time for us because we were making with friends and we weren't producing anything to sell it, right? We were just making to have fun and to wood fire with our friend. But it's funny because it's almost like, because those 3 weeks were my time actually away from a computer, and so it did feel off for me, coming home, I thought it would be rejuvenating, and coming home was almost more difficult because my day-to-day was so far from what that, like I want my regular time to be closer to that. and it was so far that like the mental chasm was more difficult, which is what I thought of when you were talking about taking a whole month off. Like I can imagine the build up to it. And then also how everybody talks about like, oh, you have to catch up after vacation so much with work. You would have had kind of chaos on either end.
Yeah, it wouldn't really been a big enough break. I would have like burnt out. And when I do, we haven't been on a big vacation in a long time, but when we do go on a vacation, I need many days to get into vacation mode also. So in some ways, the 4-day work week felt more manageable than taking 1 month off.
Well, it's consistent, right?
Yeah, it's more consistent, and it's just so much more pleasant way of living. But, we don't have kids, so that's not, I can see not everybody being able to do that.
But I think there could be, and neither do we. So, I can hypothesize all I want. But at least from it was so funny that I saw you post about this as I was finishing this book, because they were giving different case studies of, well, maybe it's not 4 days a week. Maybe it's 5 days, but they're 5-hour days instead of 8-hour days. Or maybe there's so many different ways you can do it.
Yeah.
To fit within, if you do have coworkers or if you do have employees or whatever, like, okay, well, maybe the schedule you have with them is one way. So then you need to, like, I don't mind the idea of, okay, well, maybe I'm still working 5 days a week, or let's be honest, 6 or 7 days a week, but they're 4 to 5 hour days. Like, that's super manageable to me. And it kind of goes with my energy level of like in the afternoon, I'm useless.
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't focus
as long as it works for you, everyone, and I'm still open to like adjusting. Like, it's good to just reset and think about, sometimes I might just need to have like a really big week just to get like the stress out and then go back to 4 days. Like during, I'm sure September and October will be a little heavier throwing days.
You've just taken the words out of my mouth. I was like, so tell me how your holiday prep works.
I'm not like super strict. Like, yes, I will always work more if I don't set the guidelines, but occasionally, yeah, you do have to work a little bit more. And I can handle those times of more work because I am I'm more relaxed already before, and I can look forward to it also.
Yeah, I was thinking like this way, when you're working more, you're going up to the typical 5 days a week instead of you're already at 5 and now you're going to 7.
Yeah. Yeah, there might be a few weeks where it'll be 5 or 6 days. It won't necessarily be more throwing, but it might be more photos and more promoting and more sales. And some of that stuff, can be fun for me. So a lot of times it doesn't necessarily feel like work, but
so it would kind of ebb and flow with leading up to a studio sale or the holidays or like times that you're like, okay, this is a major,
and I still fire. So I do all gas high firings at a community studio. So I bisque at home. I have my own electric kiln for bisque, but I don't have my own gas kiln. So I don't, I fire a little bit every 10 days. So I don't mind having a lot of bisqueware at home and then just slowly kind of glazing it over time to build up for it.
That was my next question, because I was thinking like 4 days a week sounds amazing, but clay is such this fickle, like when it's dry, like, so I was thinking about how does that that commitment to your time fit in within the realities of this pesky medium that we're working with. I mean, weather-wise, at least Northern California is a little more consistent.
Yeah, but when it's raining, I can't do my 3 days of like throw, trim, 3 days in a row like that. It doesn't work. I need days more for me to be able to trim it. But I live right above my garage, so I can go cover it, spread, I'll still try to not get into the days off to like trim something. Sometimes if it is too warm in the summer, I can make more pots in the week. I can do 2 trim days, just trim the next day immediately. But
got it.
Yeah, you really have to adjust with the weather. And, I don't have a damp room. And my garage isn't really a garage. It used to be like a carport that they closed up. So it's really, really drafty. It's really not enclosed. So there's a lot of breeze.
We have this is very Midwestern. It's a thermostat, but it reads the humidity in the room.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Because like as I'm getting progressively hotter in this room, like it just fluctuates so much. And the humidity in the Midwest compared to where Francesco was in Italy is the reverse, right? He expects the summer to be dry and the winter to be humid the first year that he was here. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. That's not how this is going to work. And he was like, what? So it's just, yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, I'll look at the forecast and see sometimes like I'm not going to make something that requires more, joining of pieces during a heat wave or something. I'll just wait.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's interesting to think about all the things that we have to like educate the people who want to buy things from us, or when you are doing wholesale, like trying to work to a deadline in clay is really difficult and something I'm having to unlearn of like, okay, I'm big on like under promise, over deliver. But you can't even really do that with clay because it's like, even if I underpromise and say, okay, it's going to take us 2 weeks, knowing it only takes a week to do something, it's like, oh, well, actually,
yeah,
never mind. Nothing's drying and I can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really changes all the time. So I do feel I like to adapt and respond. And it makes things a little more interesting in the studio.
I just keep coming back to this idea that I think it's really interesting that in having, so to speak, more restrictions on your time, right? You've created this schedule for yourself. My assumption is I think a lot of people coming into self-employment think about the flexibility and the freedom and like, oh, I can just pop down and it doesn't matter, when in actuality, when we leave it open like that, most of us do tend to overwork. And so kind of actually having a much more strict or set schedule, like you were saying in the beginning, when you just changed based upon your husband's work schedule, you were working all the time. Whereas now it's kind of like, okay, these are my work days and it's set, that actually is giving you more free time.
Constraints are just, they work for me, even for my creativity, for my art practice, for my painting. The more rules, the more constraints, like the more limitations, the more creative I can be. And I think my business is better because of it. But that's what works for me. I don't think rules are for everybody. And I like to break the rules a lot as well. So, as long as you're open to that part too.
It's a true artist spirit. But it's interesting because I wager a bet that there's more people that would benefit from constraints more than we allow ourselves to think. Right? I think, or like a lot of people were like, oh, I'm best at night. I'm a night person. I'm like, I did truly marry a night person. Like I can see his energy spike. Like you can tell in just like physical body language. But I wager a bet that more people are just procrastinators than actual night people, or like would actually benefit more within the constraints than I think it's probably a smaller percentage of people than we like to think.
Yeah, I definitely am good at procrastinating, but I'll procrastinate with work. So I'm still doing some other kind of work too. There's a reason I'm putting something off is usually like I'll allow myself to do that.
I like that notion because what I was thinking of was the amount of things that I can get done before I get taxes done is astounding. Like I'm so productive leading up.
So today is the first of the month while we're recording this. I do my budget religiously on the first of every month. Like I love it. It also it sets me up for the next month. I know what's coming in and out. I do it for the business and for personal. I do my taxes in February every year because they're just ready to go. The spreadsheet, and it's just a basic Excel spreadsheet. I don't use any apps. I've tried them. I've tried all the other ones, the QuickBooks.
Oh, QuickBooks is terrible.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. Just a basic spreadsheet with the tax categories. It takes me 90 minutes once a month. I love it. I love it.
I'm gonna pay you for your time to help teach me. I do budgeting every single month as well, but I don't necessarily use the tax categories, which is the problem. Because I'm doing it for myself to think through how things are, especially the discretionary spending stuff with business, right? Like that's where things can get out of control if you let it. And so I'm tracking all of that. And so I'm not necessarily organizing it for how the government wants to see it, which is where it falls. And then also I feel like there's so many I'm going down a tax tangent, all the other paperwork you have to keep track of to put together, to file all together. I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
This is where we talk about business entities, and because we're technically an S corp and
Yeah, I'm just a sole prop, so it's much more simple when you're a sole prop.
Yeah, that's the smart. The S Corp made sense at a time. It maybe doesn't as much anymore, but there's no sense going backwards. So I digress. There's a lot of little tangential things here, people. Do you feel like there was anything you did initially when you were starting to get into 4 days that like either eased you into it or was a learning curve that you're like, now that I know this is what I wish I knew kind of thing?
The only thing is I wish I would have done it sooner. I really wish I would have done it sooner. I mean, I really held myself back for a long time, not trying it.
Yeah. Are you, since you mentioned painting and the other mediums that you're interested in, does that 5th day open you up to those, or are you like fitting all of the things into those 4 days?
The painting classes that I teach are in the evenings, like 5 to 7. So I'll do that on one of those 4 work days. I'll have more creative free time on the days off, and I'll often be painting on those days. And those will help develop either other classes or I'll sell the paintings, but that's more like free time.
Cool. Yeah. And I feel like all of us have a desire for personal creative time. Like that's our identity, that's our soul. And so essentially you're giving yourself more time to explore more of that without any kind of end goal or necessary plan in place.
Yeah.
Right.
And occasionally I'll do like a day of fully playing in the ceramic studio. And that I won't think of it as a work day because I'm really not. None of that stuff is for sale and it's just for fun. And I might just, It might just be a few hours. But if I'm really wanting to do that, I definitely won't stop myself.
That makes a lot of sense to me and is also like what I've heard from other conversations, like to keep going in this career and craft, like to have that time and that energy to explore and to have that kind of sacred and carved out for yourself is like essential.
Yeah, it really is. And it was just too much like what I was doing before. And I just didn't feel like myself. And so it wasn't just for the business, but just for my personal well-being.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm like, okay, teach me what to do. I don't understand.
You just have to believe in yourself that you can do it, because I didn't for a long time. I'm still surprised that I'm doing it. It feels fresh still, even though it's been over a year.
Yeah. So, because the post I saw, you had said it was been a full year, right? That's like...
Yeah, in February. So...
Amazing. I love it. Being conscious of time, I realize we are very quickly already at an hour. So I'm just going to keep repeating the same question, and which is silly because it's like, I just got to suck it up and like commit and get it done. As opposed to like, okay, but what's the real trick? I'm sure
there's no trick.
Amazing. Well, for people who don't know your work yet and want to see what is happening in these beautiful 4 days, where should we send them?
Well, you can check out my website. It's cloutierceramics.com. It's just my last name, Julie Cloutier. And on Instagram, I'm at JG Cloutier. And I started a new Substack a few months ago called Clayfulness.
Clever. Wait, so you're putting out more content and working less. Now we really got to dig in here. What?
Check it out.
What? I got to know, does the Substack get written on the 5th day?
I'm very loose with the Substack. I dwell on it and write a sentence here and there over the whole month, so.
Perfect. That makes me feel better.
It happens with breakfast.
I was like, hold on. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for being here, and I love listening to your podcast.
Okay, so I'm really far away from working a 4-day work week. The first thing I probably need to do in order to get closer to this dream reality is not manage 4 different businesses. And frankly, my dream week isn't necessarily the 4-day work week exactly. Personally, I dream of a world where I spend a max of 3 to maybe 4 hours a day on the computer, and that's it. And then the rest of the day I can spend making, whether that be in the studio with my hands in clay, in the garden with my hands in still sort of clay, maybe at an easel that's been collecting dust for years. I don't mind working 6 days out of the week, if those days are way shorter than the obscene number of hours of screen time I currently have. My point in reflecting on all of this is that I don't want you to finish this chat with Julie and think that a strict 4-day work week is the thing you have to do in order to maintain creativity in your small business. However, I do think we all need to come up with a bit more regimented set of working hours in our self-employed lives to make sure we do this work for the long run. Yes, so many of us are passionate about what we do. Yes, we love it. But that doesn't mean your mind and body doesn't need some honest to goodness, true and pure rest as well. And yes, all you lovely community members, I can hear you laughing at me all the way through the internet to my side of the headphones when you hear me talk about rest. Because you all know the best that I'm saying this out loud to remind myself more than anything. I'm a work in progress too, my friends. So if you've been flirting or even seriously dating burnout for as long as I'm feeling, then you might want to pop back over to episode number 215, where Nicole Dacey and I talk all about burnout and the elusive search for balance. If you enjoyed this episode or anything here on the podcast recently, could you do me a huge favor and grab a towel, wipe the mud off your hands. It's okay, I'll wait, no big deal. And then just super quickly pop in a rating and a review on whatever podcast app you are using to listen to this episode. Don't overthink it. I don't want you to totally get out of your creative flow. Just a quick one sentence about why you like listening or what your favorite episode was or what you're doing while I keep you company in your headphones would be amazing. Doing so will help trigger those pesky search robots and spread the word to more creative makers trying to figure out how the heck to make a living from the things we make. If reviews aren't your thing, but Instagram or now Threads is, then grabbing a screenshot and sharing it on whatever social media platform would be equally awesome. Be sure to tag me at The Maker's Playbook on all the platforms or on whatever new ones come out in a week or so, and I can send over a huge thank you as well. And just to be clear, that was a joke. I don't think there's any new social media platforms coming out. Don't stress out. Once again, this episode was made possible in part by our sponsor, Amico.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brent, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brent. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.